It was just after midnight when the message was sent. A few lines of desperate text that would upend 2 lives forever. It began, like most tragic mistakes, with a moment of fatigue and hopelessness. But this wasn't just any message. It was a cry for help from someone who had nothing left to lose. What neither she nor the billionaire on the receiving end could have known was that fate was watching, and it had other plans. Emma Torres sat curled up on her second-hand couch, her coat still on, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. The old radiator in the corner clicked and coughed, struggling against the cold creeping through the cracked windows. Outside, sleet hissed against the glass in sharp rhythms. It was one of those nights when even the shadows seemed to shiver. She glanced over at the little digital clock on her phone. 12:08 a.m. The day had officially ended, but the pain hadn't. The eviction notice on her counter stared at her like an accusation. Her rent was due 3 weeks ago, and the landlord had finally lost patience. Tomorrow, she and her 5-year-old son, Leo, would be out on the street. Emma's fingers trembled as she scrolled through her contacts. Her mom was long gone. Her sister had her own 3 kids and barely made ends meet. The shelter she tried earlier had no beds available until next week. Her last hope was a local assistance program she'd heard about from another mom at the school, but it required a sponsor or reference from someone with financial standing, someone with power. A hopeless idea took root. Emma remembered an old client from her brief stint as a personal assistant at a corporate event planning agency. She didn't know him personally, just that he was on the invitation list. Adrian Vale, a tech billionaire. He had been polite when she served his drink, even tipped her a crisp $100 bill just for bringing him an extra napkin. The encounter lasted seconds, but he had smiled. That smile lingered in her memory. She had written down a number once. She wasn't sure if it was his office, his assistants, or maybe a public-facing business line. It was a shot in the dark, but what was dignity when you were about to sleep in your car with your child? Emma typed out the message. "Hi, Mr. Vale, you don't know me. I worked a gala your company held 2 years ago. I don't know if this is the right number, but I'm in a really desperate situation. I'm a single mom. My son and I are about to lose our home. I'm not asking for a handout. I just need a reference or contact who could help me get into a shelter or job. Anything. Please." She hit send before she could overthink it. Then she curled into herself on the couch and waited for the silence to swallow her. Across the city, high above the lights of Manhattan, Adrian Vale stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse suite. The view should have been magnificent, a tapestry of city life pulsing below. But his thoughts were far away. His phone buzzed. It was past midnight. He frowned. His contacts were carefully filtered. Unknown numbers rarely got through. Yet here it was. He read the message once, then again. The wording was disjointed but real, raw in a way that even seasoned scam attempts never managed. It wasn't asking for money. It was asking for dignity, for a door. And more than that, it didn't even seem like she expected an answer. Adrian walked to his desk and sat down. He could have ignored it, probably should have, but he didn't. Instead, he replied, "Who is this?" Back on her couch, Emma's phone buzzed. She blinked at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. "Who is this?" The words blurred slightly from her tears. It was him, or someone close to him. She didn't know which was more terrifying. She wiped her eyes and responded. "Emma Torres. I was a server at the Vale Tech Gala in 2023. You gave me a $100 tip for a napkin. Sorry if this message is inappropriate." I didn't know where else to turn. There was a long pause. She could see the typing indicator blink and vanish. Then it reappeared. A reply came a minute later. "Why me?" Emma swallowed hard. Her fingers hovered over the screen, then typed. "Because you looked me in the eyes. Most people don't." She stared at the screen, numb with fear, regret, and shame. Then another message appeared. "Where are you right now?" Her heart thundered. Was that concern? Suspicion? Interest? She hesitated, then shared her location. Her apartment complex on the edge of town. A half-empty building with flickering lights and broken elevators. Another pause. Then, Stay there. I'm sending someone. Emma's mind spiraled with worst-case scenarios. Had she just invited danger into her home? But it was too late to take it back. Within 20 minutes, a black sedan pulled up in front of the building. A suited man stepped out. He looked around and then checked his phone. Her phone buzzed again. My driver is downstairs. His name is Eric. He has credentials. Don't go anywhere without confirming it's him. She crept downstairs cautiously, Leo still asleep upstairs with a neighbor who often helped her out. Eric met her in the doorway, his posture respectful but firm. Miss Torres? I'm here on behalf of Mr. Vale. He would like to speak with you. In person. She stared at him, speechless. He said it was urgent. Emma found herself inside the kind of luxury vehicle she'd only seen in movies. The hum of the engine as quiet as her racing thoughts were loud. Eric offered her water, but she barely noticed. Her mind kept replaying the texts. The fact that a message meant for a ghost had reached someone who actually existed and answered. They arrived at a high-rise she didn't know the name of. Security let them through with a silent nod, and they took a private elevator to the 52nd floor. When the doors opened, the air itself seemed richer. The hall stretched into a modern, minimalist suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the stars above the skyline. And there, standing in front of it, holding 2 mugs of coffee, was the man she'd only seen once, 2 years ago. Adrian Vale. He turned slowly and their eyes met. The same eyes that had once offered her a moment of grace. Now they were filled with something else. Curiosity, concern, calculation. He extended a mug. Let's talk, Miss Torres. And with that, the night that began with a desperate mistake began to shift into something else entirely. Something she would never have believed if she weren't living it. The coffee was warm, rich, and far too expensive for someone like Emma. She barely took a sip. Her fingers, numb with anxiety, gripped the delicate mug while her eyes darted across the room. Everything here seemed too perfect, like a museum someone actually lived in. Art that probably cost more than her entire building hung on the walls. The floor was spotless. The silence was unnerving. Adrian watched her over the rim of his cup. His expression was unreadable. You look like you're expecting a trapdoor to open beneath your feet, he said quietly. Emma flinched at the accuracy. I'm not used to this, she replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. This? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Or people listening when you speak? A lump formed in her throat. Both. Adrian set his mug down on the glass coffee table between them. He sat across from her in a charcoal-gray armchair, sleeves rolled up, expensive watch glinting in the soft light. Everything about him radiated control, measured, careful, precise. And yet, something in his voice wasn't cold. It was curious. And beneath it, something else, restrained emotion. I read your message several times, he said. Most people who reach out to me want money, investments, publicity. But you, he leaned forward. You didn't ask for any of that. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. I didn't know what else to say. I wasn't even sure the message would go through. It did, Adrian said. And I don't believe in coincidence. She shook her head slowly. I wasn't trying to get anything from you. I'm tired of doors slamming shut. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window. The city lights stretched endlessly behind him like a digital galaxy. I grew up on the east side of Detroit, he said. Tiny apartment. Cockroaches. My mother worked double shifts. I used to sit on the fire escape and pretend I was somewhere else. Somewhere where life didn't feel like a countdown to disaster. Emma's eyes widened. She hadn't expected a billionaire to talk like this. When I was 16, he continued, I hacked the local library system, just to see if I could. A week later, someone from a federal agency knocked on our door. I thought I was going to prison. He turned and gave a wry smile. Instead, he gave me a scholarship. Emma stared at him. That changed your life. Adrian nodded. It changed everything. One chance. That's all it took. But most people don't get even one. That bothers me. His words hung in the air like smoke. You gave me $100 for a napkin, Emma said suddenly. It paid for groceries that week. Adrian chuckled. I'm guessing that's not standard tip protocol. It was the first time anyone looked at me like I mattered, she said. Even for 5 seconds. He studied her again, more carefully now. Tell me about your son. Emma's face softened instantly. Leo. He's 5. Loves dinosaurs and peanut butter toast. Thinks I'm some kind of superhero, even when I'm crying in the bathroom. Adrian nodded, slowly. Where is he now? I left him with my neighbor upstairs. I couldn't bring him here at 1 in the morning. I'll have Eric take you home soon, he said, walking back to sit down again. But before you go, I want to offer you something. Emma froze. Offers from people like him came with contracts, hidden costs, or PR motives. Adrian leaned forward. I'm not giving you money, he said. That's not what you asked for. But I'm going to give you a job. One that pays well, has benefits, and will give you enough to start over. Not charity. Opportunity. Her breath caught in her throat. You, what kind of job? My foundation just launched a community outreach project. We need someone local. Someone who understands what it's like to be overlooked, ignored, dismissed. Someone like you. Emma blinked, stunned. You just met me. I could be lying. I could be. You're not, he said firmly. I can tell when people are lying. You're not clever enough for that. She laughed despite herself. Thanks. It's a compliment, he said, almost smiling. You're honest. Raw. Unfiltered. That's rare. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. What's the catch? Adrian was quiet for a beat. I want a monthly update, in person, about how you're doing and what the program needs. Not numbers, not stats, just truth. Emma nodded slowly. That's it. That's it, Adrian said. You don't owe me gratitude, just effort. Her voice cracked when she replied. Then I'll give you everything I've got. Back in her apartment an hour later, Emma stood at the doorway in a daze. Leo was still asleep, curled under a threadbare blanket, thumb in his mouth. She knelt beside him and brushed a curl from his forehead. She had come within hours of losing everything. Instead, she had been handed a lifeline. Not a miracle, not magic. A moment, a door that opened instead of slamming shut. Across the city, Adrian stood once more at the window of his penthouse, phone still in hand. He reread the final message Emma had sent before leaving. I don't know why you helped me, but I won't let you down. He stared at the words for a while, then typed a message and saved it to drafts. Sometimes, the right mistake leads you exactly where you're meant to go. He didn't send it. Not yet. Emma stood in front of the mirror, tugging nervously at the collar of her borrowed blazer. It was slightly too big, the sleeves swallowing her wrists, but it was the most professional thing she owned. Her fingers fidgeted with a missing button as her reflection stared back. Tired, anxious, and still not quite believing any of this was real. Behind her, Leo munched loudly on dry cereal and made T-Rex noises with his spoon. You look like a fancy boss lady, Mom, he said through a mouthful. Emma smiled despite the nerves curling in her stomach. That's the idea, baby. The next hour passed in a blur. Eric, Adrian's driver, arrived right on time, dressed in the same black suit and blank expression as before. He greeted her with a polite nod and opened the door with the kind of deference that still made her feel like she was wearing a costume she didn't deserve. The building they pulled up to this time was different. Not a skyscraper, but a sleek, modern facility nestled between a library and a small clinic. A brass plaque outside read, Vale Foundation, Community Outreach Center. Emma's breath caught as they entered. Inside, the space was bright and warm, sunlight streaming through large windows, walls painted in soft earth tones, and artwork created by local students lining the halls. It didn't feel like a billionaire's vanity project. It felt human. She was greeted by a short woman with fiery red hair and a clipboard, who introduced herself as Nora, the program director. You're Emma, Nora asked, smiling wide. Adrian told me you'd be joining us today. I hear you're our new community liaison. Emma blinked. He already told you that? Nora chuckled. Oh, honey, he doesn't do anything halfway. He handpicked this place, this team, and apparently now you. The orientation was quick but overwhelming. Emma met the other staff members, social workers, counselors, volunteers, and toured the center. There were rooms for counseling, job training, food distribution, even a play area for kids. It was a haven, disguised as an office. By noon, Emma was seated at her very own desk. A modest corner space with a donated laptop and a window that overlooked the small park across the street. A real desk, a real paycheck, and, for the first time in what felt like forever, a sliver of real hope. 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, coffee-fueled meetings, and late nights helping Leo with homework at the kitchen table. Emma quickly proved her worth. She wasn't just a story. She was smart, quick to learn, and above all empathetic. The other mothers who came into the center saw her not as a suit, but as one of them. Because she was. Emma listened to them talk about missed bus routes, abusive landlords, food stamps getting cut, children sick without insurance. She took notes. She filed complaints. She called contacts, escalated issues, made noise. Adrian's name opened doors, but Emma's passion pushed them open wider. And every week, just like he asked, she met Adrian in person. Always at the same cafe near the park, always over coffee. He listened more than he talked. No security detail, no PR team. Just him and her, seated at a small table. 2 very different lives crossing over something strangely real. I looked into your school records, Adrian said one day, sipping his espresso. Emma nearly choked on her tea. You did what? You were top of your class until sophomore year. Then your grades dropped. Emma looked away. That was when my dad left. Adrian nodded. I figured. But it means you're smarter than you let on. I didn't really have time to be smart, she said. Had to grow up fast. He set his cup down. Would you ever consider going back to school? She laughed bitterly. With what time? Or money? I can cover both. Emma blinked. That wasn't part of the deal. It wasn't a deal, Adrian replied. It was an investment. That word made something flutter uneasily in her chest. She couldn't quite name the feeling. Hope mixed with fear, like standing at the edge of a cliff with a parachute that might be made of paper. But not everything was as bright as her new world seemed. Late one evening, after putting Leo to bed, Emma noticed something strange. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. The message was short. Careful who you trust. She stared at the screen. The text had no sender name, no context. She thought about blocking it, but something in her gut said to wait. She reread it several times, heart thudding louder with each pass. The next morning it was gone. Deleted. Her stomach twisted tighter when she arrived at the center and noticed the new intern. Slick hair, expensive shoes, wrong energy. He said his name was Cameron, claimed to be shadowing Nora for credit hours, but he asked a few too many questions. About Adrian. About how Emma got the job. About what kind of deal she had with the man upstairs. Emma brushed it off at first. But over the next few days, she noticed Cameron watching her. Always from the corner of his eye, always just close enough to make her skin crawl. And then, late one night, her mailbox was left open. Her son's favorite toy, his stuffed dinosaur, was missing from the apartment. She turned her place upside down. It wasn't just lost. It was gone. At the next coffee meeting, she didn't hesitate. Adrian, she said, leaning forward, voice low and tight. Someone's watching me. He stiffened almost imperceptibly. Who? There's a new intern, Cameron. He's asking questions. I got a weird message. Then Leo's toy disappeared. Adrian's jaw clenched. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want to seem paranoid. You're not, he said. Cameron doesn't work for the foundation. He's from a firm that's been trying to dig into my personal life for years. Emma's stomach dropped. Why? They think I'm hiding something. Or someone, he said carefully. Journalists, investors, opportunists. He looked her dead in the eye. And now they think that someone might be you. Emma stared at him, stunned. Why would they think that? Because I've never brought anyone into my circle like this, he said quietly. Ever. The air went still. Emma felt it in that moment, the invisible weight of a secret hanging just outside her reach. Adrian, she said softly. What aren't you telling me? He stood up, tossing money onto the table, and said just one thing before walking away. Be careful. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. Emma couldn't sleep. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator and Leo's soft breathing in the next room. Her apartment, once a refuge, now felt exposed, vulnerable, like the walls had eyes. She sat at the kitchen table, her phone glowing in her hand, staring at the message history with Adrian. His last words echoed in her mind. Be careful. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. Emma typed and deleted a dozen questions she wanted to ask him. What was he hiding? Why were people watching her? Who exactly was she working for? Instead, she typed only 2 words. Tell me. No reply. The next day at the foundation, Cameron was gone. Nora said he'd left the program. But the way she avoided eye contact told Emma it wasn't that simple. Emma pressed her. Did Adrian fire him? Nora hesitated. Let's just say, Mr. Vale doesn't tolerate surveillance. Or betrayal. Emma's skin prickled. That word again. Surveillance. She nodded and excused herself, her mind reeling. By lunchtime, Eric arrived at the center. No warning. No message. Just that same black car idling silently out front. When she stepped outside, he opened the door and handed her a folded piece of paper. Emma unfolded it. Don't bring your phone. Trust no one. She looked up at Eric. Where are we going? To the house, he said simply. The Vale estate was not what she expected. It wasn't the glass penthouse. This was something older, hidden. A mansion tucked into the cliffs outside the city, far from lights, noise, or neighbors. As they passed through the wrought iron gates, Emma saw the ocean in the distance, a silver streak against the stormy sky. The driveway curved through ancient oaks until the house rose before them, stately and brooding. Stone, ivy-covered, almost gothic. A man like Adrian didn't just live in the clouds. He kept secrets in the shadows. Inside, the house smelled of leather, books, and something faintly metallic. A fire crackled in the hearth. The silence pressed in around her like velvet. Adrian appeared in the doorway to the study, sleeves rolled, tie undone, barefoot. You came, he said, almost surprised. Emma held up the note. Did I have a choice? He gestured for her to sit. I promised you truth, he said. But truth is heavier than you think. Once you carry it, you don't put it down. Emma crossed her arms. Try me. Adrian nodded slowly, then walked to a small cabinet. He opened a hidden panel and pulled out a thin black folder. When he handed it to her, his hands were trembling, just slightly. Inside were photos, documents, screenshots, names, all connected to a single entity, the Wexler Group. Emma flipped through the pages, her breath catching. Surveillance logs, financial transactions, leaked communications, all pointing to an elite corporate intelligence firm known for blackmail, smear campaigns, even forced bankruptcies. They had destroyed people, publicly and quietly, without ever stepping into the light. They've been after me for years, Adrian said, because I wouldn't play their game, because I fund the opposition, journalists, nonprofits, whistleblowers. Emma looked up, heart racing. And now they think I'm your weakness. He nodded. You are, he said simply, because I trust you, and they know it. Emma shook her head. This is insane. I'm just a girl who texted the wrong number. No, Adrian said, stepping closer. You were the right message, at the right time. She didn't know whether to feel terrified or flattered. And the threat? She asked. The toy? The message? That was them? Yes, a warning shot. But they won't stop at toys. Emma's voice turned to ice. What do they want? Leverage, Adrian said. To force me to comply. Or disappear. Emma closed the folder. So what now? I run? Hide? No, Adrian said. You fight. If you're willing. Her laugh was hollow. With what? I don't have power. I have a second-hand laptop and a son who thinks T-Rexes are real. Adrian smiled faintly. Power isn't always about money. It's about stories. Truth. You're in a position now where your voice can't be silenced. Not easily. She gave him a hard look. You want me to go public? I want you to tell your story, he said. About what happened. About what's happening. Through the foundation. Through media. Through anything. If they try to bury you, the world will dig. Emma felt like the floor had tilted beneath her. She hadn't signed up for this. And yet, some part of her, fierce, protective, raw, had already made the choice. For Leo, she whispered. Adrian met her eyes. For everyone like him. That night, back at the apartment, Emma wrote. She didn't sleep. She didn't stop. She typed everything, her story, the texts, the job, the threats. She included documents Adrian had given her. She outlined every twist, every truth, and at sunrise she pressed send. To Nora, to a journalist Adrian trusted, to herself. It was done. The first match was lit. Later that day, while Emma walked Leo to daycare, she noticed a black SUV across the street. No logos, no plates, a man inside wearing sunglasses, just sitting, watching. Emma stared back, unflinching, and smiled. They picked the wrong single mom to threaten. It began with a whisper. Emma's story appeared first on a small but respected independent journalism site. No clickbait, no embellishment, just facts, chronological, supported by documents and screenshots, her name bold in the byline. From welfare to whistleblower, a mother's fight against the billionaire surveillance machine. Within hours, it exploded across social media. By midday, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Emma Speaks. Hashtag The Wexler Files. Hashtag Single Mom versus Power. News outlets picked it up. Podcasts requested interviews. Advocates rallied. Even former victims of the Wexler Group came forward. Voices that had been silenced for years, suddenly given air. At the center of it all, Emma Quinn. And for the first time in her life, people listened. Emma sat on the worn couch in her apartment, surrounded by half-eaten takeout and sticky juice boxes. Leo napped in his room. The TV flickered softly with a panel of talking heads debating whether the Wexler Group could survive the coming lawsuits. Nora had called that morning to tell her the foundation's inbox was flooded with support, donations, volunteers, press. Even politicians were making statements. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt exposed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. Turn on channel 8. Now. Emma grabbed the remote and flipped the channel. The screen cut to a shaky camera feed, outside a courthouse somewhere downtown. Dozens of reporters crowded the steps. Then, Adrian Vale stepped up to the podium. No suit this time. No entourage. Just him. And a folder. I've spent the last decade fighting systems designed to silence the voiceless, he said. Today, thanks to Emma Quinn, the world gets to see those systems for what they truly are. He held up the folder. We have enough evidence to dismantle the Wexler Group. Their reign of fear ends now. The crowd erupted. Flashbulbs. Shouting. Questions. Emma's breath caught. He wasn't hiding behind her story. He was standing with her. But not everyone was celebrating. That night, the power in her building flickered, then died. The halls outside echoed with heavy footsteps. Boots. Maybe. A door slammed. Shouting. Emma grabbed Leo, heart pounding, and reached for her phone. But it was dead. No battery. A note had been slid under her door. Stop now or we stop you. She stared at it, adrenaline racing. Then came a knock. Emma froze. Another knock, louder this time. She pulled Leo close, her body shielding his. Emma, came Eric's voice. It's me. Open the door. She hesitated, then slowly cracked it open. Eric stood outside, dressed in plain clothes, eyes sharp. They're testing you, trying to scare you. But you're not alone anymore. Behind him stood two officers, real ones, not hired suits. Eric nodded. Adrian called in protection. You're under surveillance. but so are they now. Emma nodded, relief flooding her chest. Leo peeked out from behind her. Are the bad guys gone? Emma knelt down, brushing his hair from his face. Not yet, she said. But they're losing. The days that followed were chaos wrapped in clarity. The Wexler group collapsed like a dying star, imploding under the weight of whistleblower testimony, leaked files, and internal defectors emboldened by Emma's courage. CEOs disavowed them. Stocks plummeted. Federal investigations launched. Emma gave interviews, not flashy ones, but honest, vulnerable. She spoke of poverty, of fear, of the simple desperation that led to a misdialed number that changed everything. And she always ended the same way. We don't need miracles. We need people who care enough to listen and brave enough to speak. Weeks later, Emma stood at a podium herself. The foundation had hosted a public event in her honor. A fundraiser turned victory celebration. Lights, music, speeches, but it all felt like a dream. Adrian stood in the back, arms folded, smiling faintly. She took a breath and leaned into the mic. I used to think the world didn't care about people like me, she began. And then I sent a text to the wrong number. Or maybe the right one. The crowd laughed softly. That message didn't change my life because of who answered, she said. It changed my life because someone answered. She paused. You don't need billions to change a life. You just need to see people, to hear them, to believe them. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was steady, real. Emma stepped down from the stage with a quiet kind of power. Later that night, she sat beside Adrian under a string of lights at the after-party, watching Leo chase Bubbles across the lawn with the other kids. I owe you everything, she said softly. No, Adrian replied. You owe me nothing, but you owe yourself the truth. And you gave it to the world. She looked at him. You could have fixed my life with money. Why didn't you? He smiled. Because I've met 1,000 people with money. Only a few have the fire to change the world. You were one of them. I just gave you a match. They sat in silence for a while, listening to laughter, music, the distant pulse of a world just a little bit better than it was before. Emma leaned back and whispered to herself. Not bad for a text